Clara Santos adjusted the pristine white uniform of La Belle Vie restaurant, one of the most upscale establishments in the city. The tables, adorned with fresh flowers and gleaming glasses, contrasted sharply with Clara's simple reality. A 28-year-old black woman, single mother to Sophia, her 6-year-old daughter. She worked as a waitress during the day and attended nursing school at night, driven by her dream of becoming a nurse and changing her life. Clara's day started early, before sunrise, in the small apartment she shared with Sophia. After preparing breakfast and taking her daughter to school, she caught the bus to the restaurant. The commute was long, but Clara used the time to review her course notes or plan the next steps in her life. At the restaurant, Clara was known for her efficiency and dedication, but she also faced daily challenges. La Belle Vie attracted wealthy, demanding clients, and Clara often found herself in humiliating situations. "Clara, table 6 asked for more water. Don't keep them waiting," the manager ordered impatiently. She remained calm, even when customers often treated her as invisible. Despite the hostility of the environment, Clara never let it dampen her determination. Her goal was clear: to secure a better future for Sophia and fulfill her dream of helping people as a nurse. At the end of each exhausting day, Clara would sit in a corner of the kitchen with her notes, counting the minutes until her next shift or her evening class. Even so, her mind was steadfast in her purpose. One day, things will be different, she thought. Somehow, Clara knew that day was closer than she imagined. The following day, La Belle Vie was especially busy. Members of high society filled the tables, and the sound of clinking glasses blended with discreet conversations. Clara moved gracefully between tables, balancing trays and maintaining a professional smile, even as the day's weight bore down on her. In the midst of the commotion, the main door opened, and Daniel Albuquerque entered with his son, Miguel. Daniel, a widowed businessman known as much for his fortune as his arrogance, exuded authority. Dressed in an immaculate suit and wearing a watch that gleamed under the chandelier's light, he seemed oblivious to the stares he attracted. Beside him, Miguel, with light brown hair and bright eyes, was a stark contrast to his father. The boy exuded a simplicity and kindness that were almost palpable. The manager, eager to please important clients, rushed to seat them at the best table in the restaurant. "Mr. Albuquerque, it's a pleasure to have you with us again. This table has been specially reserved for you and your son," the manager said, pulling out chairs with exaggerated reverence. Daniel gave a brief nod but said nothing. Miguel, on the other hand, smiled shyly at the manager before sitting down. Clara was assigned to serve Daniel's table. Approaching with her notepad, she felt Daniel's critical gaze weigh on her. He looked her up and down, his expression oozing disdain. "Finally, someone to serve us." "It's about time," he said, adjusting his chair impatiently. Clara maintained her smile, though she felt the sting of his words. "Good evening, gentlemen. Welcome to La Belle Vie. May I start with your drink orders?" she asked, her tone gentle and professional. "A bottle of your best red wine, and something bland for the boy." Daniel replied without even looking at Clara. "Dad, I'd like some orange juice," Miguel interjected, smiling at Clara. Clara noted the order, grateful for the boy's kind gesture, but Daniel quickly resumed speaking. "Make sure the wine meets my standards, not yours, and certainly not the likes of your kind. It seems one must be explicit here." Daniel's comment made Clara's heart tighten, but she remained composed. "Certainly, sir. I'll bring the wine and juice shortly." As she walked away, she felt tears threatening to form, but took a deep breath to stay strong. She knew she couldn't let herself falter. While Clara prepared the drinks in the kitchen, Miguel watched his father with a reproachful expression. "Dad, why were you so rude to her?" the boy asked, his innocence revealing his belief in the goodness of people. Daniel looked at his son disdainfully. "Miguel, you need to understand that some people are here to serve us. That's how the world works." "But that doesn't mean we have to treat them poorly," Miguel countered, crossing his arms. Daniel scoffed, dismissing the conversation as unworthy of further discussion. When Clara returned to the table with the orders, the tension was palpable. She placed the wine in front of Daniel and the juice in front of Miguel with precise, elegant movements. But Daniel, as if searching for a reason to complain, picked up the wine glass and scrutinized it suspiciously. "This is lukewarm," Unacceptable. I expected better from this place, he said, slamming the glass down. Clara swallowed hard, feeling her cheeks flush. Before she could respond, Miguel intervened. I think it's perfect, Dad. She did a good job, the boy said, smiling at Clara again. Clara nodded gratefully at the boy, but Daniel shook his head impatiently. Don't interrupt, Miguel. She doesn't need your opinion. Just order what you want and stay out of things you don't understand. Daniel's words hurt Clara more than she cared to admit, but she maintained her composure. I apologize if I failed to meet your expectations, sir. Shall I bring another bottle? Daniel waved her off dismissively, saying nothing. In the kitchen, Clara allowed herself a moment to take a deep breath, feeling the weight of Daniel's condescending words. It wasn't the first time she'd been treated with disdain, but his tone seemed to pierce her dignity more deeply than usual. Still, Clara reminded herself of Sophia and her dream of becoming a nurse. She couldn't afford to give up. He's just another arrogant customer, she thought. But that boy, he's different. It's like he understands. Clara wiped away a stubborn tear before returning to the dining area, ready to face the rest of the night. The evening continued as usual at La Belle Vie, with the sound of clinking utensils and soft conversations filling the elegant atmosphere. Daniel and Miguel were halfway through their meal. Miguel, animated, talked about school and his plans to learn to play the guitar. Despite Daniel's cold demeanor, the boy seemed determined to bridge the gap between them. Clara kept a watchful eye on the dining room, but didn't linger. She knew her duties awaited and stayed focused on her tasks. Meanwhile, the manager called her to the kitchen, but something about Miguel's behavior caught her attention. He had gone silent, his hand on his neck, his eyes wide with panic. Then it all happened at once. Miguel tried to get his father's attention, but no sound came out. He was choking. At first, Daniel didn't grasp the seriousness of the situation until the boy began struggling desperately for air. His skin turned pale, and his movements became frantic. Miguel? Miguel, what's happening? Daniel's voice grew louder, drawing the attention of nearby diners. Miguel pointed to his throat, tears streaming from his eyes as panic set in. Daniel stood abruptly, knocking over his chair. The entire restaurant froze. Some patrons rose from their tables, watching the scene with a mix of concern and helplessness. Daniel tried to steady his son by the shoulders, shaking him slightly as if that might help. "Someone do something," he shouted, his voice echoing through the room. Panic spread through the restaurant. Waitstaff hesitated, and customers whispered nervously, unsure of what to do. Clara, who was in the kitchen organizing trays, heard the commotion from the dining room. Instinctively sensing something was wrong, she dropped everything and ran to see what was happening. When she arrived, she saw Miguel collapsing in Daniel's arms. The boy's face was turning purple, and his movements were weakening. Clara didn't hesitate. Her nursing training kicked in. "Excuse me, sir, is he choking?" Clara asked as she quickly approached. Daniel, still in a frenzy, looked at Clara with a mix of distrust and fear. "What do you think you're doing? This is serious." "I know what I'm doing. Let me help or he won't have time," Clara replied firmly. Daniel's expression faltered. He realized he had no choice. His money, power, and influence, none of it could save Miguel at that moment. He stepped back, allowing Clara to kneel beside the boy. Clara acted swiftly. She positioned Miguel safely and began the Heimlich maneuver, applying careful and precise pressure to his abdomen. "Breathe, Miguel. It's gonna be okay," Clara murmured, more to herself than to the boy. She repeated the motion several times, but Miguel still couldn't breathe. The restaurant was silent. All eyes were on Clara as she worked, their anxiety filling the air. Daniel, now on his knees beside Clara, held his son's hand, tears streaming down his face. "Please, save my son," Daniel whispered, his arrogance utterly shattered. Clara stayed focused. With one final firm thrust, Miguel expelled the piece of food blocking his airway. He gasped, coughed, and began breathing again. The sound of the boy regaining his breath brought instant relief to the dining room. Some diners began to clap, but Clara remained focused, holding Miguel and checking his vital signs to ensure he was stable. "It's all right now, Miguel. You're safe," she said gently. Miguel looked at Clara with tearful eyes and tried to speak, but his voice was too weak. Instead, he offered a faint smile, a silent thank you. Daniel, overwhelmed, wrapped Miguel in a tight embrace, openly sobbing in the middle of the dining room. "My boy, my son, I thought I'd lost you." Clara observed the scene, exhausted but relieved. She knew she had done the right thing, regardless of who Daniel was or how he had treated her earlier. Standing up, she wiped her hands on her apron. Daniel looked up at Clara, his eyes red and swollen. He seemed ready to say something, but instead picked up Miguel and hurried out of the restaurant, muttering about taking him to the hospital. Clara stood still for a moment, processing everything that had just happened. The entire dining room erupted in applause. Colleagues and customers approached her, calling her a hero. One emotional waitress clasped Clara's hands. "You saved his life, Clara. That was incredible." Clara smiled timidly, wiping her tear-filled eyes. Inside, she felt a mix of relief and pride. She had made a difference. At the end of the night, Clara grabbed her bag and walked out of the restaurant, exhausted but content. As she walked home, she looked up at the starry sky and whispered a silent prayer. "Thank you, God, for giving me the chance to save that child. This is why I do what I do." She didn't know it yet, but that selfless act would change her life forever. The sun was already shining on the city when Clara woke up in the small apartment she shared with Sophia. The events of the previous night felt like a distant dream, but the fatigue in her body was a clear reminder that it had all been real. As she prepared breakfast, Sophia ran up to her with her usual enthusiasm. "Mommy, are you tired?" the little girl asked, noticing the dark circles under Clara's eyes. Clara stroked her daughter's curly hair and smiled. "A little, my love. But it's a new day, and we have to make the most of it." After dropping Sophia off at school, Clara took the bus to La Belle Vie. As usual, the ride was filled with her thoughts. She reflected on what had happened with Miguel, the urgency of the situation, and how Daniel's desperation had broken through his arrogance. "Will he remember to thank me?" Clara wondered, though she quickly dismissed the thought. She hadn't acted for recognition, but because it was the right thing to do. When Clara arrived at the restaurant, she was met with curious looks and unexpected greetings. Colleagues who usually ignored her now seemed to see her in a new light. "Clara, you're a hero," exclaimed a waitress, smiling as she passed. Clara smiled back, a bit shy. She wasn't used to the attention. She went to the locker room, as she did every morning, to grab her apron and start her day. As she opened her locker, something unusual caught her eye. A carefully folded white envelope lay on top of her belongings. Intrigued, she picked it up and opened it. Inside the envelope was a handwritten letter on elegant stationery. Clara recognized the name at the bottom before she even began reading. The firm, elegant handwriting belonged to Daniel. "Clara, yesterday you saved the most precious thing in my life, my son Miguel. There are no words sufficient to express my gratitude for what you did. In a moment of desperation, you showed courage, compassion, and knowledge that no amount of money could buy. I must confess that before yesterday, I was a blind, arrogant man, lost in my own ambition. I judged people based on what they had, not who they were. But yesterday, you showed me what truly matters. My son is alive today because of you, and my life has changed because of your kindness." Inside this envelope is a check. It's not just a gesture of thanks, it's an attempt to repay what you did for us. I know money cannot measure the value of the life you saved, but I hope it can help you achieve your dreams. I promise, from this day forward, to be a better man, a better father, and I hope, a better person. With all my gratitude, Daniel and Miguel Albuquerque. Clara felt her heart race as she read the letter. By the time she finished, tears streamed down her face. She wiped them quickly and took out the check from the envelope. When she saw the amount, she almost dropped it. $500,000. For a moment, she stood frozen, staring at the check. It was a sum she had never imagined holding in her life. Clara clutched the check to her chest and looked up at the ceiling of the locker room, as if speaking directly to God. "Thank you, Lord. Thank you for giving me the chance to save a life. Thank you for changing the course of my life and my daughter's life." She stayed there for a few moments, taking deep breaths and absorbing the weight of what had just happened. That letter and that check were not just gratitude or money. They were proof that her dedication and compassion had deeply touched someone. Back in the dining room, Clara's demeanor had changed. Her eyes sparkled with a new light. The day proceeded with its usual routine, but inside, everything had transformed. As she served customers, she thought about how that money could help her complete her nursing degree, provide a better school for Sophia, a better home, and perhaps even open her own clinic one day. Daniel's gesture hadn't just changed Clara's life. It was a reminder that small acts of courage and kindness can have extraordinary consequences. Clara had given her best in a moment of crisis, and life was now rewarding her in ways she never expected. At the end of her shift, as Clara closed the restaurant, she smiled to herself. She knew her future was now in her hands, but she would never forget that everything had started with the decision to help, even after being hurt herself.